Welcome back to the show. We're here today with Arsheen Allam. Arsheen is the founder and CEO of GOLeafe. She has a bachelor's degree in material science and engineering and an MBA from Fuqua, the business school at Duke, my alma mater. She previously founded C-Nanos, a company focused on developing water purification systems with nanotech. She also developed an interest in graphene materials that eventually led to the launch of GOLeafe. Arsheen is responsible for the development and commercialization of the technology, as well as its strategic vision and execution. Arsheen was named Forbes 30 Under 30 list for 2019 in the energy category for her graphene-related work, and she's been recognized locally in various publications through awards such as the Triangle Business Journal, Women's in Business 40 Under 40 list, and she was awarded a Department of Energy grant to further develop an automated scale-up protocol for GOLeafe's proprietary graphene production process and further develop the graphene-based products. I take it you're an expert in carbon and graphene, so please tell us more how you got into this.
Sure. So when I was applying to college, something that was really my impetus in choosing what my major was going to be was that growing up, my parents did a really good job. So me and my sisters were all born in Canada, but my parents did a good job taking us back home to their countries, India and Pakistan. And we got to see firsthand the lack of access to basic resources like water and energy. So when I was applying to college and looking at these majors, I was trying to see what was a major that I could do that could maybe enable me to develop a technology to alleviate some of these issues. Mainly, my focus was developing low-cost water filtration solutions. So I spent my 4 years of undergrad working on a carbon nanotechnology. And upon graduation, I actually ended up patenting that carbon nanomaterial and moving to India for several months to try to commercialize that and work with some NGOs or work with government to get them into villages. But turns out it's very difficult to do business in India. And so my wide-eyed 21-year-old self had a reality check very quickly. But the technology was really good, and we were able to sell it to restaurants, hotels, schools as their water filtration systems. But I also realized during that process that these filters worked great for river water or groundwater, but not for salt water. And with most of the Earth's water in the oceans, we really needed a desalination solution. So I started reading about different technologies that were out there, and I came upon this paper that MIT published that was claiming some wonder material called graphene was going to revolutionize the desalination world. But their technology never made it out of the lab. And it was because to produce this nanomaterial called graphene, which is nothing but single layer or several layers of carbon, it was extremely expensive and very difficult to do at scale. But graphene being nothing but carbon, and having worked in the carbon nano world for several years now, I figured there had to be a better way to produce it. So I kind of dove back into the world of research. Fast forward several years of R&D later, my team developed a process to extract graphene oxide from virtually any carbon waste stream. And it's a chemical process, so we can apply it to not just the starting material, whether it's trees, grass, hay, or landfill waste. We can also modify our chemical process based on the end use application. So there's many uses for graphene, one of which was desalination. But another one was energy storage, which was another passion of mine, was getting access to energy. So that's when we kind of pivoted from being a raw material like graphene or carbon nanomaterial producer to developing a product, which was the graphene-based supercapacitor. And that's what we've been focused on for a couple of years now. That and the desalination membrane is both products we're working on.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in the chemistry. I did mechanical engineering, so I actually don't know that much about materials, but I know a little bit. And you said carbon monoxide, which is different from carbon dioxide and monoxide. And I assume there's something actually going on in this structure. So tell me a little more about what it is.
So the difference between graphene and graphene oxide is graphene oxide has these OH functional groups.
Oh, okay.
And what that does is two things. One, it makes the graphene material water soluble. So if you have graphene, even though it's extremely strong, extremely conductive, transparent, all that stuff, if it's not soluble in any media, you can't actually mix it into anything to put into a product.
It's like oil. It just kind of sticks to itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make the water soluble form of it so that we can mix it into solutions. Like, just off on a tangent, a paint company approached us and they were trying to make a more durable paint that was also happened to be antimicrobial. So they got samples of our graphene, they worked on the formulation, and they were able to make a longer lasting paint. You can't do that if it's graphene because you can't mix it in anything. So one is the oxide group, make it water soluble. So the functional groups, you can actually attach things to them. For example, you can make like boron doped or nitrogen doped graphene for battery applications if you wanted to get N-type and P-type graphene.
And is like putting these oxide groups the only way to dope graphene, or are there other techniques? Or is this the one that like you're an expert in?
That's the one that we're an expert in. You have to have functional groups in order to do doping. And what's cool about our process is the most graphene producers, they will produce the graphene and then they will artificially add these oxide groups. And that can really mess with the structure of the graphene. What we do is we directly produce from the carbon waste stream, we produce graphene oxide. We don't do graphene and then change it to graphene oxide.
And remind me, the quirky thing about graphene is flat, like it's laminar-ish, as opposed to a nanotube, which is circular-ish.
Yes, exactly.
And I guess if you're trying to dope it after the fact, you're kind of gonna make it not flat, or you'll mess around with that structure. And that's what you mean by the structural challenges. And because you insert it in process, I guess it's more natural is the way the structure comes out, and more robust.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it.
And to clarify, we do not have any interest in making single layer graphene because the product applications we're working on do not require that. So we make 3 to 5 layer graphene oxide.
Oh, okay. And what's what's the difference? Because I don't know.
Sure. So making pristine graphene, it remains extremely difficult to do and very expensive. Can't really do it at scale. And again, we can't mix it in anything. So we're just not interested in working with pristine graphene. Although there are really cool applications for it, like in LED screens and very thin, lightweight applications. And there's really cool people working on that.
Got it. And the doping allows you to give the graphene these different properties. And is the graphene in some ways a substrate for you to do other things? Got it. We had another company on a while ago that was doing nanotubes, and it's amazing how it feels like it's an open palette to build things because it's really a new technology. I guess how novel is kind of our manipulation of graphene? Is it you said you got into it kind of earlier in your career. Like, how far are we in the development cycle of this technology, do you think?
Sure. So the material itself, we have patented the process, we've optimized it. And what we're doing now with our Department of Energy grant is working with some former NASA robotics engineers to automate the entire thing to even further remove any human error that may happen in the manufacturing process. That's on the material side. Now, on the application side, we have developed a prototype of the supercap that's already, the prototype is not optimized. There's still a lot of optimization that can be done. But even in the non-optimized form of it, we're already outperforming the supercaps that are used in the Tesla Model S and the Ford F-150 Lightning pickup truck. So we're really excited about that product and taking that further.
Got it. And what makes a graphene-based, well, what is a regular supercap made out of? I don't even know.
They're made out of, they can be made out of activated carbon or various forms of carbon nanomaterials. And some are made with graphene. But again, the materials are really expensive. So there's it's kind of a double-edged sword that they may be using a really good material, but they can't use that much of it. So therefore, the supercap is not going to be that efficient.
Like energy density or power density?
Power density.
Okay, power density. I guess that's what you want to cap is that
Yep.
power density.
Exactly.
And does that allow you to have like, I guess power density is driven by what, voltage across the system? Is that what you're usually optimizing around?
The voltage and also the surface area of the material, how much power can it hold and discharge quickly.
Oh my gosh, this brings me back to like high school physics. It's like you calculate, the surface area. Okay, interesting. And so you're automating and developing. You're automating the process to get the graphene so that you can then build the UltraCap. Who ultimately buys UltraCaps these days?
So our target markets are in 3 different areas. One is in grid storage, because there is already a lot of stationary battery storage, but when there's a surge in the grid, batteries cannot supply that power fast enough, and that's when you have like load shedding and those issues. So if you have a super cap to bridge that, then they can really complement batteries. 2 is in uninterruptible power supplies. And then 3 is eventually we would like to be in electric trucks and buses, because especially buses, they stop and go a lot. And when you may be familiar with Teslas, when you brake, there's the regenerative braking happening. There is still a lot of energy loss because batteries can't absorb it quickly enough. If you have a super cap in there, it can absorb all that energy, and then when you're ready to go from stop to a go, the super cap can provide that energy rather than pulling from the battery. So you can significantly improve the battery life of EV batteries if you add a super cap component.
Yeah, so help me walk through this, because not everyone necessarily knows the difference between a battery and a traditional lithium-ion battery and a super cap. So I think a battery, you have energy density, power density, we'll say, that's maybe they can discharge like 1 times their rating, right? And a super cap or an ultra cap can do how much is it, 1,000 times nowadays, right? And then so a lot more power dense in terms of very quickly able to discharge power.
Batteries can be discharged and charged a couple thousand times. Super caps can be charged and recharged over 1 million times.
Oh wow, okay.
So they can last a lot longer, and if you're using them in conjunction with the battery, then it can, if you're not using the battery to go from stop to go each time, you're really preserving that battery's life. So instead of the few thousand times the battery can be charged and recharged, it can increase that.
Got it.
And you can use smaller batteries, which in EVs right now, the biggest thing is the weight of the battery is what decreases the car's efficiency. So if you can use a smaller, lighter battery because you're using a super cap, that's another huge benefit.
Yeah, I guess a lot of times they're putting the big battery in to get those like 3 seconds of acceleration, or 3 seconds to 0 to 60.
Yeah.
And if you can do that with an ultra cap instead, you can really reduce the weight on these things. That makes a lot of sense.
And same with any other kind of vehicle, like eventually airplanes, weight is a huge thing. Buses, trucks, weight is always going to be an issue.
Yeah. This is a dumb question for me. How do they control it so they can pull the voltage or the power from one source or another?
That's using a battery management system, which is not my expertise, but we were talking to a few people who can program it to do just that.
Okay, and so I want to know who those people are, because I'm very curious about how that works. It seems like magic.
Yeah, they're in like very high demand. It's so difficult to get a hold of them.
Yeah, I'm sure, because everyone's trying to figure out how to build these for vehicles. And then when you were talking about that same application for the grid, like that's the grid stabilization services.
Yes. And
you see a similar effect there, where you can partner with a battery system in that case.
Exactly.
Got it. Does who ends up buying the ultra cap? Like it's not the grid operator itself, is it? Or who? Yeah, how do you get that to market?
It can be. We've talked to a few people. So there's a microgrid company called Power Secure. They make their own microgrids, so they would be purchasers of the super cap. But then there's other private entities who have like solar farms. They have batteries, and they want to have super caps in there to bridge that gap. They would be another customer. We haven't talked to any municipalities or anything like that yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to prove out the product a little bit further.
Got it. But and where do you think you need to be? I guess where are you in the timeline of beginning to ship product? Because I know you're in the process of manufacturing, and I assume you've already built like full stacks, or no?
They're still prototypes, so they still need to be optimized, especially for size and packaging. Because right now, for example, we can put, let's say, 1 gram per cell. But if we have the access to the right equipment with the right funding or more funding, then we could put like 10 grams in a cell.
Got it.
So that's like huge improvement in performance and efficiency. So we're working on that piece of it. So now that our Department of Energy grant is kind of coming to a close, we're going to be raising a seed round.
Got it. I know a little bit more about like battery testing and scale up. They start with like little coin cells, and then they build pouches.
Yes.
And then I guess they call them prismatic cells, which I think are a little bigger. Like, do you have a similar analog for ultra caps? Is it exactly the same form factor, or?
Yeah. So we've made coin cells, and we're looking for people to make pouch cells for us now.
Okay. Is it similarly? So I remember with the cells, like the big issue is with lithium, they tend to catch on fire when they're in the air. Do you need like a dry box?
No. So the awesome thing about graphene is, or graphene oxide is, it does not have that fire risk.
It's just because there's no reactant.
The rate at which our renewable energy generation is growing, it's like, I have in one of my slideshows, like 20x, maybe even more, the rate at which our capacity to store it is growing. So we really, because batteries are not cutting it, so we really need supercap technology to complement what batteries are trying to do.
Yeah. And do you have a sense of, like, in many ways this is about making the batteries go further, I guess is the way to describe it. Like, how is there what's the efficiency improvement look like? Are you able to make those batteries like 50% better in a grid application? What's your sense?
So in theory, there'll be a minimum of 20% improved efficiency, but there's literature out there that says it could be 70-80% improvement.
Wow, that's pretty substantial. So really, when you think about like lithium as a limiting factor in our ability to build these battery systems, you can really make it go a lot further.
I'll also mention that I was talking to one of my friends who works for, I don't think I'm allowed to say the company, but they're like the largest EV battery producer in the world. And he went to Duke, so that's how I know him, but now he's working in Korea. He constantly gets in touch with me to see where things are going, 'cause he's a technologist himself. And he personally is very interested in incorporating supercaps into cars and using them in conjunction with batteries. But the problem with the company that he's working at is they're so hyper-focused. It's not just their company. It's even Ford and all these other companies. They're focused on making incremental improvements to batteries. Lithium ion is not going to get much better.
Yeah.
So it's pretty frustrating that even the technologists at these companies know that making incremental improvements on the battery is not the way to go. It's just convincing the higher ups that you need to find a different solution. So that's one of the challenges that we face as a supercap producers. How do we get people to adopt them and realize you need to invest in this different technology rather than sticking to this great but age-old technology that's not going to get that much better than lithium ion.
That's the classic like innovator's dilemma, right? Is there in many ways the OEMs were slow to adopt EVs until Tesla came in and showed the way, because it is challenging to take a risk on a whole new architecture. So you can't fault them for it, but that means that's why we have to have innovators like you to kind of find a new path. It makes me wonder if there's a path to bring the technology into like F1, where they have their I think their EV series.
Yeah,
and that's really the proving ground a lot of times for how these architectures get demonstrated, and even within regular F1, right? They have different energy storage processes. So if anyone's listening who knows F1 people, like A, I'd like to see your car, but then B, we got to get an ultra cap in these systems. So I guess we'll transition a little bit. Tell us about you told us a little bit about your journey of starting the company, and it's clear you were doing a lot of the technology development and research yourself. How did you know that it was time for you to start the business, and how did you know you wanted to be the CEO?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So my senior year of college, pretty much every other brown kid like me was taking the MCAT and applying to med school. And even though I was an engineering major, I had taken all the pre-med requirements just because I figured that's probably what I'd end up doing. So I also signed up for the MCAT. I took the MCAT, did pretty good. Then I filled out my applications, and the way med school worked back then, I'm assuming it still works the same way. You fill out all these primaries and you just blast it out to all these med schools, and you're hoping to get a few secondaries back. So I send out 17 primaries, end up getting 16 back. And it's like a lot more involved, the secondary application. So that's when I finally took a pause, because I was kind of on autopilot the whole way through. And I said, do I really want to be a doctor? And I have a lot of respect for doctors. And just taking the MCAT, I was like, gosh, kudos to doctors. Yep. But I realized I didn't want to, and I really enjoyed research and I enjoyed technology. So I abandoned all 16 secondaries. And that's when I decided, after graduating, I'm going to go to India and commercialize this technology. And that was a huge learning experience for me, to go there. I realized I have no idea how to run a business. Technology commercialization is really hard. Doing it in another country is a whole nother level of hard. And so I actually came back after those 6 months in India and worked in corporate as a business analyst for a couple of years. So let me make some money, one, and two, just get experience working in a corporate environment and learn from that. And after a few years of working there, that's when I decided to apply to Fuqua to go to business school and pick up that skill set so that I could be a more effective leader and CEO.
Yeah, you're on a mission. I can tell. You're gonna get all the skills you need to be successful this next time around. And how did you find business school in terms of giving you the skills you needed?
It was amazing. So I toured a few different business schools. I only applied to Fuqua because it was the only one that I saw had this huge social entrepreneurship push. There was so much talk about Team Fuqua, where like everyone just wants to help each other and further their careers, rather than a lot of other business schools were pretty cutthroat. So I did an executive program. So I was still working full-time at my corporate job, and about halfway through the program, my classmates and my professors, they were like, Arsheen, we never hear you talk about your day job. You're like always talking about GOLeafe, and you have so much passion. Like, you got to quit your day job and just go for it. So they're really the ones who encouraged me to go all in on the startup. And they've, even until this day, I've graduated like 6 years ago, I can always reach back out to like my strategy professor, my econ professor, and just get their advice. I can reach out to my marketing classmates and run a deck by them. So I really appreciated all the classroom learning, but also the network that I built at Duke's Business School. Yeah,
do they have an incubator like Duke Hatch? Were you able to tap into those resources at all?
Yes. So they had a program for entrepreneurs that I participated in, and then they have a Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship organization that you can attend all their events and do practice pitches and all that.
And most importantly, did you become a basketball fan?
Of course.
Did you ever tent?
Yes. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
But Coach K did come and speak to business school several times, which was so cool.
Yeah. He's such a legend. What did he speak on?
Just leadership.
Yeah.
And his kind of day-to-day life. And he mentioned that around his house, like wherever he has like a chair that he sits in, he always has a notebook because he gets ideas randomly. And that happens to me too. And I'm like, oh God, and I type it in my phone. It was cool to hear him. He's a little bit of an earlier generation. He kind of does the same thing. He just writes it down in his notebook. So it's cool to think all these notebooks around Coach K's house where he's just writing notes.
Yeah. My wife has sticky notes all across the house. And I think it's the same thing. it's funny how just like the act of writing like just helps you organize your thoughts in a way. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
It's good life lessons there. Let's see. So you made the leap and were encouraged by your classmates to start the company. How were you in those early days? How were you paying the bills? Did you raise capital? And yeah, tell us about that.
So there was a few awards that we won, like Duke had some pitch competitions that we participated in, and then the rest of it was family funding. So I say my dad was my biggest angel investor, but also whenever we talk to people about our business, he's like, no, I'm her employee. So it's a fun dynamic.
Yeah, no, it's good. That kind of support is so necessary to sometimes get a business going. My first year getting my last company going, Dynamo Micropower, my mother said, okay, you got to get a real job at some point, but for this first year, we're going to sponsor you to get started, and you got to raise the money by the end of the year. And without that, I wouldn't have really taken that leap into entrepreneurship. Right. And so that kind of strong family support just is so invaluable. And now that I'm launching another business again, it's like that same family support is helpful. Again,
and those couple of years of working corporate under the belt also gave me some savings that I could use towards this.
Yeah, good. And so then you won some prize money, and then you were able to get a grant, but that wasn't SBIR. That was a different program.
It's a different program. It's called Chain Reaction Innovation, and the DOE has a couple of these programs across their national labs. So I did the one based out of Argonne National Lab in Illinois. How
do people find those if they're like a prospective entrepreneur?
I heard about it through word of mouth. It was actually a Dookie who was now working for that program, and someone connected me to her, and she told me to apply. The application was coming up, so I actually applied once a couple of years ago, made it to the final round, and then didn't get it. So I applied again the following year and got it that year, which was very exciting. And it's a 2-year-long program.
And what did they look to fund specifically?
They're funding deep tech. So deep tech that is so when I was applying, you had to not have raised more than $750,000. Apparently now they have changed that. So you can be a little bit further along. But their goal was to fund companies that are deep tech. They're hard to raise money at the given stage, but they see a lot of potential in the technology that's being developed.
And you said specifically, like you're working on manufacturing or scaling up kind of the production capabilities. Was that a requirement of the grant, or was that really something you put forward in your application?
It's not a requirement. It's one of their possible avenues that they fund, like if you're trying to scale up, but a lot of it is just technology development. And it does have to have a climate angle to it.
Got it. Yeah. And you said you're working with a team. Tell me a little bit about the team and its size.
Sure. Yeah. So after graduating, when I wanted to kind of get back into research, we actually partnered with a research institute in India called the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur, because I found a professor there who had been working on graphene for several years, and our research really aligned. So I continued to work with him through his retirement, and once he retired, I switched to the Indian Institute of Technology at Tirupati, and we're working with them now.
Okay, and interesting. That's where that connection goes in terms of using your network to help you develop the technologies. And you said you're getting to the stage now where you're going to be raising a seed round. How are you thinking about that?
So this is a big question. I'm always looking for advice. So we can raise $750,000 to prove out our scale up and optimize our prototype, or we can raise $3.5 million and actually set up our own manufacturing rather than third party it out. And that'll really set us up for success, but it is a bigger risk for investors. We would have to give up more of the company. But right now, I'm equally open to both avenues, and I'm constantly exploring which one will be better for a company long term.
Okay, and so you're looking for someone. You're still looking for people to help advise you on like the finance strategy.
And we're talking to various seed funds or
Yeah.
VCs, and just informally, I'm not asking
Yeah.
any of them for money yet, but just gathering what they're looking to fund and trying to figure out what will be the best fit in terms of what type of fund to partner with.
It's funny how much it's like your funding strategy depends on the times as well. Like if it was 2 years ago, the straight answer would have been raise bigger money,
Yes.
go vertically integrated. That's what that's how you make sure you capture all the value and build those barriers. And now we're kind of in a place where it feels like there's a little lull in financing, or there's more demand for capital efficiency. And so I could see why you'd say, okay, no, we gotta do the capital efficient and steady, where maybe you're not investing in CapEx, but you're really able to grow as you're able to prove out more of the market. And that has everything to do with we're here today in 2023 and not 2021. And I think that maybe the hardest thing for people who haven't gone through it, that fundraising process, and people who are not entrepreneurs, the thing that's hard to understand is it really is, it feels like a crapshoot sometimes, where it's like, we got to make this guess. We have to make this, the strategy once, and we got to go out to market and test it, and we could totally be wrong. Yeah. But we gotta put our best foot forward, and it's I don't want to say agonizing, but it creates a lot of anxiety to understand that you're taking only so many shots on net to try and finance this the most efficient way you can. Right. But it's such a dynamic situation. Yeah.
And it really depends who you talk to, because two really great advisors that I have are my father and my husband, who I consider successful business people. And my dad is a lot more conservative, and he's a technologist at the core, even though he has run businesses. He just believes in, let's just get the technology going. My husband, he is a former journalist, ended up starting his own business in vertical farming, and in 2021, like you said, raised $50 million. And he's like, go big, go for the bigger money. It's out there. You just have to find them. It's out there. Go get the big money. Yeah. So it's like both people who I really admire and consider great advisors. It just depends who you talk to and which strategy may end up working. They could both work, but you need to choose one.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the key, is you have to choose one and really execute against it. Yep. Yeah. How do you feel about it? Is it like, do you have anxiety about, because this will be your first time raising private capital? Yeah. Or do you feel like you're prepared?
I'm feeling more and more prepared kind of every day. If you asked me 6 months ago, and I was still had the cushion of the DOE grant, I was like, not even remotely prepared. But the program, the program Chain Reaction Innovations really got us prepared, and they put us in front of a lot of innovators. And then here in Houston, I did the Rice Clean Energy Accelerator, which also put us in front of a lot of investors. That also got me prepared. So day by day, I'm getting a little bit more and more comfortable.
Yeah. And what is the preparation in your mind?
Preparing the materials. So we have two different financial models. One is, if we raise a 750, where does it get us? The other is, if we raise a 3.5, and they both have compelling stories. And two is just practicing telling that story. And obviously I really believe in it, but the way I deliver it, it lands differently with different audiences. And there's different kinds of investors. Some of them, they really care about the story and your passion, and others just want to see the EBITDA. Yep. What is it going to get us? So before, I used to be really nervous talking to any investor who I was starting to feel like, they only care about the money. But now I'm not so nervous about that, because I realized that's not the right investor for me at this stage anyway. Yeah. So if it doesn't work out with them, that's totally okay. There's others.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing about practice is you get that chance to like fall on your face a little bit and realize it's okay. There will always be other investors to talk to. I do remember that from the first time I was raising capital, I thought every conversation was the most important. Yeah. And then you're like, wait a minute, this is okay. Like we're going to go through a process. We're going to find an investor that's right for us. And it's okay if that one conversation doesn't work out. Do you feel like, when you think about kind of the future of the business, what are the big roadblocks that you're trying to overcome, that you'd use the money to overcome?
So right now our team is mostly scientists and engineers. So hiring the right supply chain person, the right plant manager to kind of manage a larger production facility, the right marketing people, and a finance person full-time. Because although I have my MBA, I do not want to be in charge of financial models forever. So building out the right team is a challenge, but one that I look forward to doing once we have the funding. But the biggest obstacle, in my opinion, is still convincing our potential customers or technology partners that the super cap is what they need to advance their technology. And it will require some investment, and integration will take time. But if they really want to move the needle in energy storage, especially as our world transitions to clean energy, they have to invest in it. So that's an obstacle that's like every day I'm working on.
Yeah. I was speaking with another entrepreneur last week, and she also has an investor who really just wants to focus on technology development. And when you think about like a technology that's deep as this, it takes kind of years of demand development to really create the orders that show up at the end. But you need a team kind of out there saying, this is why we need to invest in this technology, and these are all the other things you got to change around it. And because deep tech can't move on a dime, like you really have to invest early and often. And it's not just marketing, it's like technical education. You got to go to the conferences, you got to put out the papers. And it feels like it's a hard thing to invest in because it's so long tail in terms of when you see the positive indications. But I think those investors who really understand hard tech and really understand the need to show the market the way, those are the right folks to be investing in things like hydrogen and things like this. And it's funny how some people just get so focused on like let's build the thing. So I applaud your recognition that like we need to develop that marketing within the market. When you think about things you've done in the past, are there any failures or mistakes you made that you learned from?
When we first discovered our process to produce the graphene material, as scientists, we were so excited because we made this like wonder material that had all these cool properties that could do so many things. And we tried to go out to the market with that raw material. But there was so much noise in that raw material market. People were marketing activated carbon as graphene. They were marketing carbon black as graphene. And it was so difficult for us as a small startup that did not have the brand recognition to be able to sell our raw material. And that was one piece of it. But the second piece was if there were companies who were willing to take a chance and buy samples of our product, we would ship it out. And then we would follow up with them and say, how did the material work in your application? They're like, oh, it didn't work. And we'd ask them, well, what'd you do? And they were very cagey on their process of how they incorporated the material into whatever their product was. But a few of them, like if I dug enough, they were like, well, we added this many grams of the material to this solution and then it just agglomerated or whatever. The thing with graphene is less is more. So people were adding like grams of this material to their solutions when really you need like 0.1 grams for the amount of solution they had. But it was a learning curve for them. They didn't understand that. And they said, well, we've kind of blown our budget for that research project. So we'll get back to you if we end up opening that up again. So we realized it was going to be impossible to be a raw material supplier for this very new material that people did not know how to work with. And it was a good thing in the end because it really pushed us to develop the product applications. So one was the water filtration device using the graphene, and two is the super cap that I'm really excited about the super cap and the performance. And so it pushed us to that, and it felt like failure after failure when each company we sent a sample to was like, oh, your material's not working, your material's not working. But we had done all the characterization on our material and we're like, but it has the properties to work.
Yeah. Do you think that's because the reality is you're the expert on the graphene and they weren't?
Yes. And the problem with these larger companies are their R&D departments, even with the NDAs, they're very secretive. They will not work with you on integrating this material into their things. And like even the paint company, they were like, we are formulation experts. We got it. Thank you for your material. Good day. But because I made a friend within that organization, he did share some of the things that they did wrong. And he's like, I'm still going to try to push them to do it the right way once we get more funding for this project.
Yeah. Do you think that's because they are like, what are you going to do as a little startup? You're not going to steal their process,
right?
Right? Is it just that it's an old way of doing business?
I think so.
Yeah, and I think especially with something new, it requires a lot of change in the way like the system works, and they really need to engage like more in a consultative arrangement, right? And ultimately they need to hire you to show them like this is how this works and be very clear about the IP ownership.
Yep.
Do you think they just didn't know to think about the new technology that way, or do you think that's just a challenge with new technology development?
I think it's both. So I think there was a lot of fear within these companies. Like, let's say Sherwin-Williams would be afraid that they would tell us how they formulated their mixture, and then we would take it to what's called Benjamin Moore or someone. So there was a lot of competition within those companies, and that's what was keeping them from sharing more with us, just because they didn't want it to get out to anyone else. And it turns out there was another large paint company who they gathered a lot of information from us and then didn't actually pursue the project. And several months later, I see they put out a patent on the formulation. So, but they have no intentions of actually making a graphene-based paint. They just wanted to put the patent out so no one else could do it. So that was another dynamic going on that we have no control over.
No ability and no control over it. Well, that's curious. I have so many questions, but I really have so much time. And in terms of kind of your journey here in Houston, you shared a little at the beginning about why you came here. You did the Rice Clean Energy Accelerator. Tell us a little bit about your engagement with the ecosystem here outside of that.
Yeah, so I was super impressed by all the events that the ION had going on and how they're able to bring in all these oil and gas companies who, quite frankly, don't have a choice but to participate in the energy transition. But it's really cool to have access to them and hear about all of the efforts they're making and their kind of incubator type organizations they have within their larger corporation. It was like being from North Carolina, we didn't have that. So it's really cool to have that exposure. And I think Houston is definitely at the forefront of the energy transition. So I'm really glad that even though it was my husband's job that brought me here, that I was able to tap into that and do the accelerator and meet all these people.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're going to raise capital here in Houston or is it going to be elsewhere?
It might be. So we were talking to a few investment groups out of Houston that I met through the accelerator, but it could be, we're also talking to some from Illinois. It could be someone from completely New York that we're also talking to.
Yeah. And I think earlier you mentioned you're going back to North Carolina. What's drawing you back there?
So the Research Triangle Park and the research institutes there is definitely a big draw, but it's also just family. That's where my family is. So
yeah, it's we've had a few entrepreneurs here in Houston go back to the Research Triangle area and in material technologies. More on the plastic side, but it's there's definitely a know-how or I guess expertise in that area.
Yep.
That's a little different than what we have here in Houston. Are there any hidden gems in the Houston ecosystem that you really think we should share with people?
I think the ION is amazing. Greentown Labs, I would have loved to be a part of that, but because I was only here part-time, it didn't really make sense for me to be a part of Greentown Labs full-time, but I think it's an amazing resource to people who are entrepreneurs who are here in Houston.
Yeah. On your own journey here, what are some gaps that you found in the ecosystem?
So even within the Rice Clean Energy Accelerator, there's there's a couple of professors at Rice University who are very renowned for their graphene research. So there was a need for a bridge connecting us to those professors through the university and through the accelerator that I didn't really see. But that's not unique to Houston. It's also a little difficult to do that. Like at NC State, there's amazing engineering professors and researchers. There's not really that bridge between industry and academia yet.
Okay. And I think that is a challenge that people recognize in Houston. And I know there are a couple of groups working on that. And I think Rice has been kind of on the vanguard of trying to push that, as well as I think University of Houston as well. So it's it takes time to change things like that. I think Houston's a very international city. Do you find it's international?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've been talking through with a few of our other guests is their background being international people. And you're one of our guests who is female founder of color, and you choose to wear hijab. Do you find that you must have a different experience than other entrepreneurs who go through the system? But what are your observations about how your identity maybe influences your journey here in Houston?
Yeah, so I used to be a lot more intimidated by the way, just because I look different, especially when I'd go to technology conferences and I was the only woman. I was the only woman of color, and I was the only person with a hijab at the conference period, but not just at the conference, on the stage being a speaker. But I got over that because I realized once I start talking about the technology kind of speaks for itself, and it's very exciting to people, and it doesn't really matter how you look. And if it matters to someone how you look, it's not someone you want to work with anyway. So I've really gotten over that. And through the Houston ecosystem and the accelerator and the different events that I attended at ION, I didn't feel any of that intimidation anymore. And it's likely because the innovation entrepreneurship community is much more open-minded and awesome, but also Houston is so diverse that it was a non-issue.
Yeah. Do you think part of that is because Houston has so many international people that we're just used to people being different? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. And that being said, there was one VC group that I talked to as part of one of the events at the ION, and there's always going to be people who treat you differently. And I don't know if it's because I was a woman or because I was wearing a hijab, but the VC ended up mansplaining to me the difference between a safe and a convertible note, and he told me to Google it. And there was a part of me that wanted to be like, I went to Fuqua's business school and I've been working on my business for I don't need this. But I've learned that that's not a VC I'm going to work with anyway. I'm just going to spend the rest of the 5 minutes in this. It was like a speed dating kind of VC thing. I was just going to indulge him for the next 5 minutes and never talk to him again.
I know. That's definitely a mansplaining thing. I forget where it was. It was in the middle of COVID, like 2020 or something. And Juliana Greiser was who helped launch Greentown Houston with me. We went to some investing event, and she had previously run the Houston Angel Network. She's an active investor, and we got on a panel, and this male investor got up and it was the same thing, having explaining to her the difference between a safe note and a convertible note. I'm just going, man, he's embarrassing himself because this woman is the face of angel investing in Houston. She doesn't need to be explained to. But it's I don't know if I've been on the receiving end, so it's hard for me to relate. Yeah, but it's good to recognize that you can just move on. Yeah. Right. So, do you think? So I'm curious, just 'cause I'm curious about people. Tell me about your choice to wear a hijab, and it obviously comes from a place of faith. How has that been important to you in terms of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I started wearing hijab very young, before anyone in my family wore it, before my mom or any of my older cousins wore it. And it was because I had this Quran teacher who had explained to us in very subtle ways kind of the history of our prophet and his wives over time, and the protection that the hijab provided them. And I was only in the 4th grade, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to be protected by the hijab. And as a kid, you don't really understand the full gravity of it. And it wasn't until like later in life, like high school and college, where I really did feel like it's part of my identity, and it did protect me from a lot of things that I saw my peers having to deal with, like just the modesty that it brings. It shoos away a lot of unwanted attention, lets you focus on things that are more important. So it prided me with that safety. And then it's not easy. It's not easy wearing a hijab. It's not easy going through TSA, even though I've been on TSA pre-check for as long as I can remember. I still get randomly selected. It builds so much character over time. And as an entrepreneur, you need to have thick skin. So I do think it's really helped me in that way as well. And many years after I started wearing a hijab, my mom decided to wear it and my sisters. And so we have a really awesome community. My friends wear it. And I've seen a lot of friends end up taking it off, like post 9/11, when it was just too hard. And there's so much negativity. And that's totally, I support their choice. But I think I get a lot of strength from it. So I continue to wear it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of it is committing to the practice in spite of the challenges, and and also appreciating like the strengths it gives you. Right. And I definitely appreciate that. And I think that's a strong cornerstone of like a really powerful faith. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You do it with pride.
Thank you.
So, so as we start to wrap here, you're planning to start raising capital. You're looking for advisors to help you think through these financing options in front of you. Are there other things that you're thinking about where the audience could help you and support you in your goals?
Funding is definitely number 1, but 2, cannot put enough emphasis on building out my team. So as we start our search for a CFO and like an operations person, anyone interested in climate tech and new technology, we are looking to grow our team. If this is something interesting to them, we'd love to talk.
Yeah. Would they be remote, or would they have to be in North Carolina with you?
No, they could be remote.
Okay, good. And if they want to reach out to you, where should they find you?
LinkedIn would be the best place.
Okay, and I'll put the LinkedIn right in the show notes. Do you have any parting thoughts before we wrap?
No, this was really awesome. And I know my time in Houston is wrapping up, but this was great to be here. And I definitely know I will be back in Houston to participate in the many energy transition type events they have here.
Good. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.